All you have to do is ask my father, who literally was shot in the Orangeburg Massacre, right? Who helped found SNCC, who marched with Marion Barry and Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King, and the list goes on and on and on. And he will tell you today that he feels like this country's at 1954. And so if you want to talk about somebody...
But that doesn't mean it is. Well, you said he feels that way. That's ridiculous. Boy, he's really, I mean, it's a good strategy. Like, while the Democrats are getting all this bad publicity, just shut up. He doesn't usually do something that smart.
It's like that scene.
Last time, we showed you Bill Maher tearing apart woke MSNBC hosts for their hypocrisy. Well, this time, CNN's Bakery Sellers is in the hot seat. You know, the guy who whips out the race card every time he's losing a debate. Yeah, that one that his biased takes got absolutely dismantled by the tag team of Ben Shapiro. And trust me, it was as brutal as it was hilarious that I can't wait to break it all down for you. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss videos like this.
The Ben Shapiros of the world. Yeah. These people who don't necessarily have the intellect to have honest discussions, but but yet they're able to become millionaires because they're actually just circulating and promulgating.
So I purposely showed you that clip to set the stage for what went down when Ben Shapiro and Bakery Sellers faced off on Bill Maher's show. In the clip you just watched, Sellers takes a swing at Shapiro's intellect, because apparently, the award-winning Daily Wire host just isn't up to his high intellectual standards. Bold move. But when he finally went head-to-head with Shapiro on Maher's show, let's just say the audience quickly figured out who was actually running low on brain cells. Take a listen.
Any confounds when it comes to these particular issues, and unless you remove the statistical confounds, you end up with trying to blame vague, shadowy figures like implicit bias, which are innately, insanely difficult, if not impossible, to measure.
I don't know what he...
See what I mean about CNN? Ben Shapiro wasn't exactly speaking in ancient hieroglyphics. He was simply pointing out that the race debate has multiple layers, and if you don't break them down properly, you end up blaming everything on vague, shadowy forces like implicit bias, something that's about as easy to measure as Bigfoot sightings. That where's the lie? The reality is that the race debate is way more complex than these talking heads want to admit. But sure, let's just blame it all on some invisible boogeyman. And yet, despite completely losing the plot, Sellers still had the nerve to take jabs at Shapiro. Well, let's see how he fared when Bill Maher decided to step in. Watch this.
All you have to do is ask my father, who literally was shot in the Orangeburg Massacre, right? Who helped found SNCC, who marched with Marion Barry and Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King, and the list goes on and on and on. And he will tell you today that he feels like this country's at 1954. And so if you want to talk about somebody...
But that doesn't mean it is. Well, you said he feels that way. That's ridiculous. It is. Come on.
Exactly. Ben Shapiro was simply saying that we should focus on the real issues of racism instead of getting lost in feelings. Because let's be honest, feelings don't always reflect reality. Just because Bakery Sellers' father feels like America has regressed to the 1960s doesn't magically make it true, and credit where it's due. Bill Maher actually called that out, but am I shocked? Not in the slightest. The woke mob has always prioritized emotions over facts and statistical data. Case in point, these are the same people who tell us, you are whatever you feel you are either. So if a black man feels like he's a white woman, well, congratulations, he's apparently a white woman now. That's the kind of nonsense they peddled. It's not about truth or logic, it's about pushing a narrative, no matter how detached from reality it is. And the moment you dare challenge it, you're labeled as hateful, ignorant, or worse. Meanwhile, the rest of us are just sitting here scratching our heads, wondering when common sense became offensive.
The ridiculous notion is for either one of you all to have the audacity to believe that you understand what the experience is to be.
I have to object to that.
But you just said
I cannot talk about it because I am not part of a group. I am a sentient human being. You're right. There's two ways you cannot understand something. One is to be too far from it. We're too far from it. We can't see like you can. One is to be too close to something. And then sometimes you can't see it accurately either.
Spot on, Bill Maher. The idea that you can't talk about racism unless you're a direct victim is absolutely ridiculous. To be why that logic. No one could discuss poverty unless they've been homeless, or debate crime unless they've been mugged. Maybe, just maybe, the so-called victims aren't always the most objective voices either. Because being emotionally invested in an issue doesn't automatically make you right. That's just common sense. Every group has its own biases, which is exactly why open discussion is necessary to find common ground. But do race hustlers like Bakery Sellers, Joy Reid, and Sonny Hostin want that? Of course not. They thrive on division instead of fostering honest conversations. They push race-baiting tactics that fuel resentment and keep people locked in a victimhood mentality because let's face it, If racism suddenly wasn't the insurmountable problem they claim it is, they'd have nothing to scream about on primetime television. This isn't about progress. It's about power, and the more they convince people they are oppressed, the more influence they wield. Meanwhile, actual solutions take a back seat, and the people they claim to represent are left no better off than before.
Something I am that.
I know.
And so, but what I am saying though is for you to discount my father's experience and say that,
I'm not discounting it,
and to say it was silly.
I'm not.
No, he was shot.
No,
Were
shit.
you shot?
No, but he's still alive. Like he's right here. Like
right, but the idea that if I were to say to you as a Jew that the experience of Jews in the United States today is worse than the experience of Jews in Europe in 1939, I would not be stating accurately.
Correct.
It's not true.
That's
and it's also not true to say that the experience of black people in America in 2024 is worse on a general level than the experience of black men in 1954 in Alabama. That's just crazy.
But I mean,
You see what happens to smug race baiters who don't actually debate issues but rely on stirring up emotions. The moment they face real debaters like Ben Shapiro and sharp hosts like Bill Maher, they start stammering and fumbling, just like bakery sellers is doing here. Because when your entire argument is built on feelings instead of facts, it crumbles under the slightest scrutiny. Take the 1960s, for example, a time when racial injustice was brutally real. Black Americans faced legalized segregation. Under Jim Crow laws, were denied voting rights through literacy tests and intimidation, and risked their lives simply for demanding equality. Events like the Selma March, where peaceful protesters were beaten by police, make that era undeniable. Now compare that to 2025. Black Americans hold high-ranking positions in government, business, and media. Laws explicitly banning racial discrimination exist, and diversity initiatives ensure representation in almost every sector. Is racism completely gone? No, but is it remotely the same as the 1960s? Not even close. Yet people like Sellers act like nothing has changed, pushing the same tired oppression narrative to keep their influence alive. Because let's be real, if progress was openly acknowledged, what would they even talk about?
Really, I mean, it's a good strategy. Like, while the Democrats are getting all this bad publicity, just shut up. He doesn't usually do something that smart.
It's like that scene.
This perfectly sums up bakery Sellers, because at this point, he's just talking in circles. Nobody is saying that life is all sunshine and rainbows for black and minority communities. There are still real injustices that need to be addressed, racism included. But to claim that America has somehow regressed to the 1960s, that's as absurd as a velociraptor learning to open a door handle in Jurassic Park. Terrifyingly dumb and completely unrealistic. But here's what many people miss. Sellers' entire career is built on playing the victim. Just like Sonny Hostin and Don Lemon, their influence depends on convincing people that nothing has improved, that oppression is still as rampant as ever, and that they alone are the voices of the struggle. The moment someone challenges that narrative, especially with facts, they see it as a direct attack on their relevance. Because let's be real, if racial progress was openly acknowledged, what would these people even talk about? They'd lose their TV slots, their book deals, and their carefully crafted image as truth-tellers. So when someone like Ben Shapiro comes along and dismantles their argument, they don't just debate back, they lash out. Because the real threat isn't racism disappearing, it's people realizing it's not 1965 anymore.
The conversations you and I have had would be so many times about the co-opting of the word woke. And the fact that the right somehow has made it a dirty word. To be woke is a word that came out of the African American community, and it was about acknowledging social justice inequities, acknowledging people suffering. It is not a bad thing to care about other people, to care about the sufferings of others, and to act upon it. And so it angers me when people are like, this woke stuff has got to go. That's telling me that you don't care about my lived experience. You don't care about the oppression of the LGBTQ community. You don't care about the oppression of the disabled. You don't care about the oppression of immigrants. You don't care about your fellow neighbor. And that is ungodly. That is not.
Listening to these race hustlers speak is downright exhausting. Now they're whining about the term woke being co-opted, when honestly, they're the very ones who hijacked and destroyed its original meaning once upon a time. Being woke simply meant being aware of injustice. But they twisted it into a toxic ideology that demands blind conformity, demonizes opposing views, and cancels anyone who dares push back. And now they're upset that the term has become a punchline? Please, first off, We didn't even need the term woke in the first place. Thinking and caring for the marginalized should be a given. It's called basic human decency. That I know catchy buzzword required, but of course, that's not good enough for the woke mob. They don't just want awareness. They want control, and what's with their obsession with dragging Christianity into every debate as if it's the only religion that speaks about justice and compassion. It's clear why they do it. Christianity is an easy target, a low-hanging fruit. They can attack at whim without consequences. They wouldn't dare go after certain other religions with the same energy. Funny how that works.
Woke, it's become, and I make fun of it too, because it's become an eye roll in many ways. If woke, I assume at a certain moment, and it wasn't that long ago before we didn't have the term. I only heard it, I don't know what it was, 3-4 years ago? 5 years ago at most, when we heard the term woke, and it was like alert to injustice. I'm like, okay, I'm down with that. I always have been. I hope people still understand that about me. But yes, it became sort of a byword for a lot of this goofy stuff.
Exactly, Maher. Pure goofiness. Stuff that defies common sense at every level. That's why we have race hustlers like bakery sellers still peddling oppression narratives, even though Black Americans today have more opportunities, rights, and representation than ever before. They know full well that life for Black Americans in 2025 is nothing like it was in the 1960s, but admitting that would ruin the grift. And let's not forget the other brand of nonsense they push, like allowing biological men to compete against women in sports and share their bathrooms because apparently, fairness and biology no longer matter. As long as it fits the woke agenda, women train their whole lives for a shot at victory, only to lose to men who identify as female, but still carry all the biological advantages, and we're just supposed to clap and celebrate this as progress. This isn't about equality anymore. It's about pushing radical ideologies that make no sense, even when reality smacks them in the face. But the moment you call it out, they label you a bigot, because when facts aren't on their side, silencing the opposition is their only strategy. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.